Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this bright and early morning. There's no snow in South Delta, but I understand there might be some snow in the other parts of the Lower Mainland. So sorry if you're in one of those parts. My name's Gary Shearer. I'm the Executive Director of the Delta Chamber of Commerce and happy to be joined with the Richmond Chamber of Commerce today to learn about the BC Small and Medium-Sized Business Recovery Grant. $10,000 to $30,000 is being offered to businesses impacted by COVID-19 and up to $15,000 in additional top-ups for tourism-related businesses. This program has recently been updated to expand eligibility, so this information session will keep you informed and give you the opportunity to ask questions. Please note that we will be recording this session so members can watch the replay at another time. We're broadcasting from the Delta Chamber of Commerce office, which is located on the traditional territory of the Tsawwassen and Musqueam First Nations and of all the Hunkaminam speaking people who have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. I'd also like to offer my respect to all the elders who have gone before us and to any of the elders and First Nations people who may be with us here today. I would now like to introduce our guests from the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation. Please welcome Morningstar Pinto, Director of Outreach and Engagement, and John Cruz, Manager of Finance and Administration. Morningstar and John, thank you so much for joining us here today. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
And hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. A little bit of background on us. John and I are both working with the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery, and Innovation, and we've both been seconded from our regular work to come and support the small and medium-sized business recovery program. So I think it's been, John, how many months has it been now?
Five?
Five or 6 months?
6 months, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting ride. It's been great watching the progression of when the grant was first launched back in September to where it is now. So what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of an overview of the program, and then John's going to get into a bit of the nitty-gritty of the program. We're going to try and answer as many questions you may have in our little spiel, but we're also going to give time for questions afterwards because that's when a lot of the real value comes from this. So thank you all for being with us today. So a little overview of the program. It was launched on September 17th, as I said, and then after some feedback from industry stakeholders and businesses and staff within the ministry, our minister made some changes to the program in December to make it easier for businesses to apply. So eligible businesses can receive up to $30,000 in funding with an additional $15,000 for eligible tourism businesses, as Gary said. The program is a two-step program. So before they start step one, businesses need to visit the government's program page. So that's at gov.bc.ca/business grant program. And that's where you learn how the program works. You look at the eligibility requirements, you see what you need to apply, you look at the document checklist to make sure you're ready to go. Then you're ready for step one. So then you start your application. And that is, I think it's around, John, is it like a 6-page application, 4-page application process? We ask some questions, you click some boxes, you submit all of your documents that we've requested of you, depending on what type of business you are, and then it gets put into our system.
Yeah, I think it's five pages. 2 of them are really the questions, and then there's some declaration pages of for folks to and disclaimer kind of stuff.
Yeah. So then after applying, the BC government reviews for eligibility. So that's John's team. Well, it's not just John. There's a whole big group of people that John is working with who review eligibility. And at that point, if they have any questions, if you're missing any documentation, they'll actually reach out to you. And then if eligibility is confirmed, the business moves to step 2, which is to complete the recovery plan. So John, maybe you want to talk a little bit about some tips for success in the document list and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, thanks, Morningstar. Thanks, Gary and Leslie, for for having us today. I am from Coquitlam, so we did get a bit of snow last night, a bit treacherous coming down the hill, but got it nonetheless. But downtown, it's fine. It's like it didn't even snow. All right, so thanks Morningstar for the lead in here. We'll go through some of the pieces of our program, specifically the information that really businesses are going to need to apply for our program. And I guess we'll start with some tips for success and sort of segue into the documents that we require. So folks that go to our website, gov.bc.ca/business recovery grant, and we'll make sure that we get that link out to folks. We'll be asked for, I think it's really 5 things. And what I'll say about those, the document list is everything except for one piece, it already exists. If you file your taxes, if you're have payroll, those things you would have already filed, right? We're really focusing on the impact of COVID. So your 2019 as it compares to your current, the current year that just passed 2020 operations, right? When we talk about the document list, we have 2 lists, one for incorporated businesses and one for unincorporated businesses. And you'll be able to see all the information we look for. Like I said, we're looking to determine that the shareholder or owner of the business is a BC resident, that they employ or staff BC residents. And really, like I said, the impact of COVID on the revenue compared to 2019 and 2020. So the next part I wanted to talk about are some of the changes to the criteria. As Morningstar alluded to, the minister, after about 3 months of sort of our learnings of the program as it were in October, November, December, the minister sort of received a bunch of feedback from industry, from stakeholders, some businesses, and from us as well, understanding that the program wasn't working, wasn't as inclusive as it should be. And so we've implemented a bunch of changes, and we'll go over that right now. One of the changes that we implemented was lowering the requirement for businesses. It used to be for a business had to be in operation for 3 years, and now it's 18 months. Also now we include businesses that are temporarily closed or seasonal. And for those businesses that are seasonal, we actually review their specific business cycle. So we don't, because obviously with most businesses that have a sort of predictable business cycle, that's not the same for seasonal businesses. So we take that into account to make sure that we don't exclude them from this program. We also lifted the employee requirement. So this opened it up for some of the smaller businesses and sole proprietorships and partnerships that don't have employees. We removed one of the requirements for remittance accounts like GST and PST, which really didn't matter to our program. And one of the big changes after listening to folks that were applying was the revenue loss criteria. So what we do right now in adjudication is like I said, we're trying to support the most gravely impacted businesses. So we compare March or April 2019 to March or April 2020 to see if they've the impact of COVID and the revenue loss, especially during the first state of emergency declaration. So originally the revenue loss criteria was 70% and 50%. Now it's 70% for March or April, and then at least 30% thereafter. So anytime after April, if the revenue losses were at least 3%, then you qualify for a program. One other change that the minister announced was the retroactive application of the grant funds. So the program was announced on September 17th. So now folks can apply to the grant funds to those expenses, because we acknowledge that folks couldn't wait for us to get our stuff together, and they decided on how they were going to pivot their business or find another way to make ends meet. And we want to make sure that we acknowledge that they've already incurred some expenses towards that, like putting up barriers or whatnot. And so these funds can be used for those expenses that have already been incurred. Additionally, with some, sorry?
Oh, and I was just going to add, like a lot of people have been asking, but the state of emergency started in March. Why can't we retroactively go back to that time? And so for government, the funky way that we work, we can't actually give any money before the program was announced. So September 17th is our date. So when people are putting the actions into their recovery plan, they can do anything back to September 17th, but we can only go to when the program was announced. So that's the reasoning behind it.
That's right. Thanks for that clarification there, Morningstar.
Yeah.
One other change that the minister, in conjunction with the Minister of Finance, they also, we also now allow for some of the funds to be applied to some of the fixed costs like rent, utilities, property taxes, and whatnot. Now, going on, as Gary mentioned, there's also a top-up related to tourism-related businesses, and we've increased that with the Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture. They've supported our program as well, and we've increased the tourism top-up from by $5,000 to a maximum of $15,000. We've also expanded the definition of tourism to adopt the StatsCan definition of tourism, and it's more broad and more trust-based. So basically, if you're a business that supports tourism, you're a tourism business. I think the actual definition is activities of persons traveling to a place outside of their normal residence. So it makes me now a tourism if I go to Delta, which is good because we recognize that some of the tourism businesses aren't just supporting international travelers. It's ourselves, right? Our BC residents that are traveling within the province. And we're just reconfirming that when folks do apply, even if they say no to our program about tourism, we do make our own check and we ask them more questions just in case that they answered that question wrong. So we are looking at responses to our application and making sure, okay, does that make sense for them as well. All right, I'm gonna move on to the recovery plan. So we've partnered with Small Business BC, who's helping us with matching folks with professional service provider, but we've actually expanded our program, and the minister mentioned this as well, announced this as well, that folks can come in and bring their own service provider, people they're already working with, so long as they're one of 4 of qualified service providers. So you either have to be a practicing lawyer in good standing, a CPA like myself in good standing, well, good standing, certified bookkeeper, or a certified financial planner. Folks can choose, like I said, they can use Small Business BC to be matched with a service provider if they don't have one, or they can use their own, or the third option is they can complete their recovery plan on their own. So if they do want to be matched with a service provider, either with Small Business BC or with their own, they're eligible. Those qualified service providers will be eligible to charge $2,000 for services provided to the business application. That's above the grant, so that does not impact the grant that the business will be eligible for. I guess the last point I'll make about recovery plans is one change that we made in December was the recovery plan template used to be about 24 pages, and we understood that that was just too much for folks. They're already trying to make ends meet, and acknowledging that let's make this as inclusive as possible. And so we've condensed the recovery plan template down to 4 pages, 2 of which are the actual recovery plan, where you itemize the steps that you want to take that will benefit your recovery and your community. And what we do is we apply a lens of whether it's reasonable and it's implementable. And that's all we want to know, is that what are you going to do with the recovery grant, and how long will it take, and how much will it cost, right? That's really what people are really concerned with, right? Is how they're going to recover, and how it benefits the community. And then from there, it's the other 2 pages are, again, a declaration page and our review page. So it's really 2 pages. We also provide translation support services for folks that want to access the program in a different language. And I think that's it, Morningstar. Let me know if I missed anything.
Yeah, no, that was a lot. You did a great job.
Thanks.
You know, I think the one thing maybe we can talk about is the fact that the other thing we're trying to do right now is recognizing that the March 31st deadline is coming up rather quickly. We are encouraging people to really look at that document checklist, to get all of their documents in right away. If that happens, we are trying to allow people to move through the system a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
So we've been having a lot of success, or businesses have been having a lot of success with submitting all of their documents right away, and then submitting their own recovery plan versus being matched with a service provider. So I think there's a couple of benefits both ways. So being matched with a service provider or using your own service provider if you really need help walking through the recovery plan is fantastic, right? It gives you an opportunity to sit down and have that real look at your plan into the future if you need it. If you already know what you're doing, you have a clear plan, you've spent some money and you want to get the ball rolling, that recovery plan is like, if you run your own business, you're going to be able to fill out this recovery plan. It's really essentially, it's talking about what you're going to do or what you already have done back to September 17th, you know, and how that's going to move you forward. So I would suggest, you know, if you take a look at the recovery plan and see if it's something that you can do, because if you can submit your documents right away and you think you can do the recovery plan yourself, you're going to go through the system a lot faster. That would be one of the things we're learning, right? Yeah. So both options are good, but it's good to know that you have those options, right?
I think anecdotally, Morningstar, thanks for bringing that up. Anecdotally, I think we're saving about 3 weeks in process time when folks, because the templates become more simple. Like you said, I think we folks that do try to complete it themselves, they find that it's actually pretty easy to do so, and we do save about 3 weeks in process time.
Yeah, so I'll give a couple final thoughts. I see some hands going up. We like to get through everything just before we start opening it up, just to make sure. So just a reminder that this is a non-repayable grant, so it's not a loan. So a couple people have actually been like, oh, when do I have to pay this back? You don't have to pay it back. If you receive the money, you do need to keep tabs on what you're spending your money on, and government may ask you to fill out a report later on, just to, you know, we might do some spot checks to make sure the money is being spent the way it should be. But that's all in the application process. Businesses that have already applied, they don't need to resubmit. So if your application is in the system and anything changes, or let's say you applied and finally got your documents in between that time where we have made changes, you don't have to reapply. Our adjudicators are looking through and working with everybody. And so just a reminder that currently the program's running up until March 31st of this year. I would suggest trying to get your application in for the 15th or earlier. And then just a reminder that translation and interpretation supports are available every step of the way. So we've got some translation supports on the website. If you want to be connected with a service provider to walk you through in a different language, you can do that through Small Business BC. And they also have a list of interpretation services to walk you through the application if you need. So that's about it. So now let's get on to some questions.
Okay, it looks like we have a question from Kim. Kim, could you unmute and ask your question, please?
Yes. Hi, I'm Kim Yu, and I'm with Women's Enterprise Center of BC. And we've been administering the regional recovery and relief loans on behalf of the federal. Does the grant program take that into account at all, given that clients could be like double dipping? If they applied for example, and were approved for any at the CEBA or the RRF or anything like that?
I wouldn't say double dipping. I feel like we're trying to support businesses as much as possible, right? So if we frame it as we're able to give businesses more support, that's kind of how I would see it. John, maybe you can add to that a little bit.
Yeah, I took a sort of review of all the programs that are out there for federal and other provinces, and particular to our program, no, we don't take that into account. It doesn't impact our program. Folks that do receive other support like the rent subsidy or the wage subsidy, or even the triple RF, they report that in, well, the triple RF, they report that that revenue differently, and it would be from operations, and we're only concerned with operations to see the impact of COVID. So I would assume that most folks would be reporting that as other revenue, and like I said, doesn't come into our calculation at all.
Okay. So that's not part of the application then, and you're not prevented from applying if you received it.
Absolutely not. We do ask that. One of the questions in the application is, are you aware of the other programs? Because we want to make sure that people are accessing some of those programs that are out there, right? That the federal government provides, and even some of our other provincial programs.
Perfect. Okay, I will share that with our clients.
Great.
I have a question. Thank you very much, first of all, for doing this today, because you clarified quite a few things that I had questions on, and I didn't know who to call. So this is perfect.
Great.
So
great. Good to hear.
First question is, I did do the application on February the 10th, so the first stage of the application. So should I still be hanging tough before, of course, I do stage 2?
Yeah, this is a 2-stage process.
Yeah.
What we do, I won't get into the dirty details here of what we actually do, but we have a team that does a preliminary check to make sure that documents are complete, and they'll reach out if there aren't certain documents that are missing. And then the file is officially assigned to an adjudicator, who will then contact applicants to bring them through the process. Folks that do want to submit a recovery plan, we have seen some folks go ahead, but it's best to wait for the adjudicator to make sure that all the right pieces, especially if you want to be matched with a service provider.
Okay, yeah, and that was my next question was, I mean, and you've sort of alluded to that, is maybe a service provider isn't necessary, right? Exactly. So, I mean, what are the pros and cons of that service provider, doing that and versus not doing that? Because as you, 30 years. So is it necessary that I go that route? I mean, I ticked off, yes, put me there because I thought that would help me get through the process and be accepted versus not accepted. But, if I don't need that and it speeds up the process, obviously I don't need to do that, right?
That's interesting.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I haven't heard that feedback yet. Okay. Yeah. No, it's not necessary to be connected with a service provider if you feel like, and we acknowledge that businesses out there, they know what they can do. They know better than anybody like myself that would say, okay, this is what you need to do for recovery plan. And you can change your mind. So no worries there, Chris. What I will say is that some folks do need some of the support. And that's why government said, let's connect them with service provider to help them pivot and think of other ways that they can access other revenue streams or find ways to become more efficient. Because there's 2 ways, right? You can either find more revenue or make your business more efficient. And I'm an accountant by trade, like I said, and obviously if you have connections to an accountant, that'd be great. But there's other 3 people you can connect to as well, and they can help, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, if you think you can handle sort of outlining the recovery that will, the steps that will benefit your recovery and your community, then by all means, I think that you can go ahead with completing that document.
And I would say, take a look, Chris. Even if you don't do the recovery plan, it is available on the program webpage. So you can download it and take a look. And if you're like, boy, just to make sure, I'd like to continue using a service provider. Right now, it does take a few weeks in the queue to be matched with a service provider, right? That's so right. It does, I think if you're having a hard time, really coming up with ideas, or you need some advice, or you need to talk about the real financials, you need to have somebody look into your financials to suggest and advise on, if you just are like, I'm at a loss, I need somebody to help me figure this out. Very different conversation than, I've been in the business for 30 years. I know exactly what I want to do. I need some money to help get me through this and get me to the next phase. So take a look at the recovery plan. If you're like, boy, I can totally do this, then you can actually, you can reach out and say, hey, I've changed my mind. Don't match me with a service provider. I want to I'd like to go up my own.
So
Okay,
should
we
I,
have
should I
a
be,
question.
oh,
Sorry, go
sorry.
ahead, please.
I just wanted, it's just a follow up to that. So should I be saying I don't need a service provider now, or waiting for the person to come back to me with my, from my application?
We'll have an adjudicator reach out once they
Oh.
complete the eligibility, and you can confirm for them there then.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. Can you clarify the extra fees that we can use for accountant service? You mentioned that you'll pay up to $2,000 for a service provider to help with the application process that's not part of the grant. So maybe you can just walk us through, I have an accountant, certified accountant that I want to help me. How does that accountant get the fees for helping me out with this grant?
Good question. Thanks, Gary. So we, like I mentioned, we have partnered with Small Business BC. They're helping with the matching of service providers, but they're also helping with vetting our service provider pool. So folks that want to bring along their own service provider because they're just more comfortable working with their own accountant or lawyer or bookkeeper, as long as they qualify for the program and there's an expression of interest, we will direct those applicants to basically declare or introduce their service provider to us upon eligibility. So once we verify eligibility, we'll reach out and say, okay, well, if you'd like to bring your own service provider, they'll fill out this form, and we'll have the service provider matched up and make sure that they go through that process to make sure that they are in standing with their specific professional body.
And so what is the expectation as far as lead time for the service provider to go through the application process and be certified?
Good question. We're trying to get that information as early as possible. So it does take about, I think it's 3 days, 4 days, depending on, because we actually, so Small Business BC actually connects with each of those regulatory bodies. So I think the return time is 4 days at the most.
I would say at the least, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is. It's 3 to 4 days, around 3 to 4 days, but can get up to around 7 days, depending on when they work out and when they connect. No, that's just, it's, I'd rather
yes, good point.
Beat the expectation. So essentially you put in your application, you wait to find out if you're eligible. You're notified that you're eligible. You pick which route you want to go. You either pick you want to be matched with a service provider, or you want to go with your own or use your own service provider. If you want to use your own service provider, both the business and the service provider are given, it's kind of like a web form. It's like an expression of interest where they talk about each other to make sure that they're connected. That then goes over to Small Business BC. They vet the service provider and then they connect the two of them, and then Small Business BC pays the service provider. So that's the connection there. Hope that's clear. Yeah.
Thanks, Morningstar.
No problem.
All right, thank you. I believe now we have Lydia has a question. Lydia.
Thanks so much. We were in a meeting earlier this week, and a couple of our colleagues from some different organizations in business were sharing a story with us about some businesses that they're connected with who had made applications and were denied because they were only at a 48% revenue reduction. They hadn't exactly met 50%. And so instead of being able to get the entire amount at 50%, they got $0 because they were at 48%. And there was an expression of frustration on their part saying, why isn't this program designed in the same way as things that are like the Qs and the new CIRCRA, which have a sliding scale of support to match the sliding scale of revenue loss. And I know that right now, this morning, we're talking about the actual process, but I'm curious if you're aware of a point in time as we near the end of March where there will be a decision made or any changes to the program that will be made to accommodate those who have come very close to that point in time, but to that point of reduction, but have not exactly hit 50% in order to qualify for funding.
I'll take that one. So the first point, there's about 3 questions that I heard in that. So the first thing I'll say is that the revenue loss criteria or ongoing revenue loss criteria is actually 30%. So I just want to be clear, it was 50% previously as the original program was stated, but we've adjusted that. So folks, we will be reviewing that for the 30%. So I want to be sure those folks would have been re-reviewed to make sure that they would have hit the 30%. But that could be just 50 or 30. The reason that the revenue loss criteria, when this program was designed, Treasury Board wanted to really focus on the businesses that were most gravely impacted, right? And that's why we have the 70% revenue loss for March or April, and then 30% ongoing any other month thereafter. In terms of a sliding scale that the wage subsidy has and the rents, that's because of how employees are being paid and whether they're employed, and it goes up as more employees, right? It's 75% of your of the wage expense. This program is a grant program, a bit different in that we want to know how we can support recovery of those, again, businesses that have been most gravely impacted. But to your last point, the minister has been constantly coming back to us and to industry and to stakeholders in terms of feedback, and he's always listening, and we get this information all the time. And I know that Morningstar and I relay it to our executive team and to the minister to see if there's going to be changes. And he did say something that I'm not aware of yet, but that changes could be coming in early March. So we're actually eager to hear what that is as well. And so yes, the feedback is getting to him, but I want to make sure that for that particular situation, folks that didn't hit the criteria, it's because we're trying to support the most gravely impacted businesses, but maybe that means an adjustment to the criteria in that respect, but it is 30% ongoing.
And I would say maybe their 48% was the threshold for 70. So maybe that's where the gap is, where they were actually refused. It could be that they were at 48% when that initial loss needs to show 70%. So that could be where the issue is versus the 30% later on, because because they would have made the 30% threshold. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Can we go over this again, because I hear all these percentages.
Sure, of course.
And reading the website, if we could just say run through an actual scenario. So I'm a business. My March, April revenue in 2019 was $100,000.
Okay.
In 2020, my March, April revenue was $50,000. So I'm down 50% year over year. Where do I qualify? How do we proceed on that basis?
So for what we do is we compare your March 2020 revenue. So if you had $30,000, for example, in April 2020, and in April 2019, you had $100,000. So you would have had a 70% loss there, right?
All right, so I would have to show a 70% loss before I can even get past go.
That's right. The first state of emergency is what we're trying to clarify that.
All right. So it has to be 70. And then you mentioned 30% they're going forward. How does that?
So let's take May. We'll take May. And if your May 2020 is 70,000 and your May 2019 is 100,000, then you would hit the 30% revenue loss there.
Okay, so for the case of this business who had 48%, I can't recall, Lydia, if that was for the March, April timeframe that they were, we don't know. Okay, so if they showed a 30% loss in the April, May 2020 compared to April, May 2019, then they would qualify for this grant.
As long as they show
Not
the
in April.
initial 70% loss.
That's right.
They need to make sure that they
All
need
right,
to.
so if they didn't have a 70% loss in March, April of 2019, 2020 versus 2019, then they will not qualify for this program at all.
Correct.
Not as it's currently
Got
designed.
it. Understand. Okay, good. Do we have any other questions out there? So let me ask, you mentioned the March 31st date. Now, if applications get in prior to the end of March, will that money be available in April, May for those applicants, or does the money actually have to be dispensed before the end of March?
That's a
Great question. Great question. The current accounting rules around grant programs for the provincial government do require that funds have to be dispersed. There'll be some time in between now. I'm an accountant by trade, right? So I understand the rules about it. There'll be that window in early April that will allow us to still record funds being dispersed to this current fiscal year. However, the minister is aware of this issue, and we brought it up, is that you can't. If someone applies, if for me applying, Gary, and I had my business and it says it goes to March 31st, I'm in if I apply and I hit submit at March 31st. And that's how I personally feel about it. The minister has heard this, and we've personally, Morningstar, have given that feedback and says, you have to let them in. There's no way. And we will do our, pardon the language, the damned, thank you, Morningstar, to make sure those files get in. There's no
John,
way.
You've got 3 young girls at home.
Oh my God, that's okay.
Darndest.
Yeah, exactly. I will do whatever we have to do to get those files in.
I think part of what it is we're doing is, we do a little bit of a roadshow, connect with people, to share the information that we have and to bring feedback back. And I will tell you that these conversations that we're having, Gary, and they are not unusual. These are the questions that are being asked the most. And every time we do one of these sessions, we gather the feedback, we gather what we've heard, and we share it. And we are being listened to. It takes some time. Government is not known for moving very quickly because it has to go through, we have to go to Treasury Board. Any change you make to a program, you actually have to go and put in a big document and ask for changes and get them approved again. And so it does take time, but I do know that this isn't falling on deaf ears. So
no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
With regards to the grant program, can you remind me, what is the pool of money that's available for this grant program?
345 million.
345 million. Do we know how much has been issued to date?
I think the last run, we were around 45 million, 42 million. Yeah, we and that's definitely because of the changes that were announced in December, that we were able to pivot that quickly and start to really see money moving out the door. Yeah, I think that's the last update I saw was about 42. A bunch got approved last night, another something like 2 million.
So we have 34 days to spend $300 million.
Well, we have about 10,000 files in the system, okay. Right? Okay. So we're actually, I was telling Morris, I was like, we should stop having these calls because there's a lot of files in the system. So I think we have based on the trend and which files that are being found eligible and the average grant, I think we're on track to spend all that money. But again, like you said, Gary, we got 34 days.
So we have a question in the chat. I submitted the application on the 22nd of January and have not heard anything yet. So where do people go to find out the status of their applications?
So that's interesting because we do have a team that's triaging files, doing their preliminary check to determine that all the documentation has been uploaded, and then it gets assigned. And the last time I checked, the predominance of files were about 3 weeks in terms of when it gets assigned because of the volume that we're currently experiencing. But that particular file, I'd have to look in specifically. Sorry, I can't speak to why that's.
I would say if you go into the system and you can see where we can see where it's at. So there's, and I'll share this information with Leslie to send out as well, but Business Recovery Grant Program at gov.bc.ca is kind of our, we have a hotline, which I don't remember the phone number because I have numbers and I don't communicate. And then we have an email address. So we'll share a little 2-pager of information with Leslie afterwards to share with everybody that has all of the different, like if people need more help. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any hands or anything in the chat. So with that, any closing remarks, John or Morningstar?
Yeah, we hope that the information was helpful today. We want to encourage folks to apply, and yeah, we just want to get the support out there. Like Gary said, we got 34 days to push hard. Thank you for this time today, though.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Well, thank you both for taking this time today. I know that